Today we're going to look at a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, chapter 21, verse 5. Now, why are we looking at this verse in the chapter, the gopis attracted by the flute? It's because this is a verse quoted by Srivas Thakur of the Panchatattva. Lord Caitanya asked him to recite this verse and other verses from Srimad Bhagavatam when Lord Caitanya and Lord Nityananda first encountered one another during their appearance. Of course, they are eternally together. But in the lila of their first encounter, this verse was recited by Srivas Thakur. And we'll discuss what the effects were upon Sri Nityananda Prabhu hearing this verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bahapiram natavadavapu karnayo karnikaram. Bibradvasa kanaka kapisham vaijayantim chapmalam. Randran Venor Adara Sudaya Purayan Gopa Vrindaya. Vrindaranyam Swapadaramanam Pravishat Gita Kirti. Mahapiram Natavadavapu Karnayo Karnikaram. Bibradvasa Kanaka Kapisham Vaijayantin Chamalam. Randran Venor Adara Sudaya Purayan Gopa Vrindaya. Vrindaranyam Sapadaramanam Pravishat Gita Kirti. Vaishnavis. Bharha, a peacock feather. Apidam, as the decoration of his head. Natabara, of the best of dancers. Vapu, the transcendental body. Karnayo, on the ears. Karnikaram, a particular kind of blue lotus-like flower. Bibrat, wearing. Vasa, garments. Kanaka, like gold. Kapicham, yellowish. Vaijayantim, named Vaijayanti. Cha, and Malam, the garland. Randran, the holes. Veno, of his flute. Adara, of his lips. Sudaya, with the nectar. Apurayan, filling up. Gopa Vrindai, by the cowherd boys. Vrinda Aranyam, the forest of Vrindavan. Swapada, because of the marks of his lotus feet. Ramanam, enchanting. Pravishat, he entered. Gita, being sung. Kirti, his glories. Translation. Wearing a peacock feather ornament upon his head. Blue karnikara flowers on his ears. A yellow garment as brilliant as gold. And the Vaijayanti garland. Lord Krishna exhibited his transcendental form as the greatest of dancers as he entered the forest of Vrindavan, beautifying it with the marks of his footprints. He filled the holes of his flute with the nectar of his lips, and the cowherd boys sang his glories. Purport. The gopis remembered all the transcendental qualities of Krishna mentioned in this verse. Krishna's artful way of dressing and the beautiful blue flowers placed over his ears excited the gopis' romantic desires, and as he poured the nectar of his lips into his flute, they simply lost themselves in ecstatic love for him. Om Agana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. you're hearing Shukadeva Goswami speak overwhelmed with emotion as he describes how the gopis, Krishna's most beloved associates, saw Krishna entering the forest. And what happens when Krishna enters the forest, especially in the autumn season? So the gopis are describing how Krishna plays his flute. Now, the acharyas point out that the sound of Krishna's flute is especially attractive during the autumn season. It becomes especially irresistible. Of course, there's no limitation materially on anything Krishna does. The impact of his flute playing has no limitation, yet and still, when he plays during the autumn season, the attractiveness of the flute increases even more. The Shastra describes that Krishna doesn't understand his own happiness because his own happiness is always increasing. So he knows his happiness, and then his happiness increases. And then he knows it again, and his happiness increases. Is your happiness like that? We are very foolish, incompetent, inept imitators of Krishna. We want our pastimes. We want our consorts, companions, and partners. We want our intimate exchanges. Krishna has all that infinitely. So the question for the conditioned soul is, must I imitate Krishna? Or if by serving Krishna, I share in Krishna's happiness without my having to worry about my own happiness? This is the issue, the paradox that Bhakti raises. Conditioned life means whether you're a karmi performing activities of bad or good karma, or you're a Gyani, a metaphysical speculator, or you're a mystic yogi trying to develop mystic powers, or you're a demigod worshiper, your whole focus is your own happiness. And Bhakti, the pinnacle of the yoga ladder, reverses the whole misconception and reestablishes you in the correct conception that you simply strive for Krishna's happiness and you'll be happy without even worrying about it. You would think that's what we all want, a no worries program for happiness. But we can't swallow the pill this way. What do you mean? I don't worry about my own happiness and I'll be happy. I don't know if I can handle that. Maybe this is just some kind of religious faith. Believe that by satisfying Krishna, you'll be automatically satisfied. Believe it. We may mouth it, but we have doubts because for countless lifetimes in so many species of life, on so many planets and so many universes, we have acted for our own happiness. Sometimes we do it ruthlessly. Sometimes we do it in a very gentle, sensitive way. But the bottom line is always the same. What's in it for me? And sometimes that me includes those near and dear to me. So how is it that we can share in Krishna's unlimited happiness? We get a flavor of that unlimited happiness, hearing about his beauty as seen by the gopis and as presented by Shukadeva Goswami, who, as we said, is overcome with emotion. You've got two attractive unlimitedly attractive features going on here. The sound of the flute coming from the holes as Krishna blows through the holes on the flute. And then you have the nectar of Krishna's lips. Both are equally attractive. And then you have the forest situation. Jiva Goswami points out that the forest is all nicely cleaned and decorated by Vrinda Devi, who is the protector and maintainer of the Vrindavan forest. She makes the forest so that Krishna is stimulated for his pastimes. Krishna doesn't have to worry about setting up his enjoyment. He has energies, shaktis, agents that do all that for him. Now just think whenever you want to try to enjoy all the preparations and worries, planning and scheming you have to go through, right? Maneuvering grossly and subtly, influencing persons, motivating them, diplomacy, things you say, things you don't say, all to make a happy situation for yourself, right? You want to accumulate things. You want those things to be in working order. You don't want mental anxieties. You don't want physical distresses and illnesses. You want the environment to cooperate. No earthquake tremors like a few days ago. Did you feel it here? Yeah. Yes, we felt it at New Gupta Raj about 7 a.m. in the morning. No pollution, no climate change, no COVID. We want the world to be a perfect stage for our pastimes. Yet Krishna has warned us in Bhagavad Gita, Dukkalayam Shashvatam. Not this place, sorry. This is not the place. We can't accept that, right? It can't be true. I've got this body, I've got desires. This has got to be the place. The magic moment has to be now. But when we hear about Krishna's beauty in Srimad Bhagavatam, we're humbled. We know we can never imitate Krishna. Why do we even bother? That is the great question. Why do I bother? What am I doing with my life? Thinking I'm the supreme enjoyer, the supreme controller. And as you've often heard me point out, you cannot enjoy without controlling. I hope many of you have been meditating upon that point. As soon as you want to materially enjoy, there must be some attempt to control. Somehow, some way, you have to influence the situation, even so gently and subtly. We're very poor imitations of Krishna. Now we say, Janmadi Yasyataha. The absolute truth is that from which everything emanates. This is there at the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam in the invocation. And that Srimad Bhagavatam is echoing what Vedanta Sutra says. The supreme absolute truth is that from which everything emanates. So you look at your life and you see the elements of your life. Friendship, family affairs, romantic affairs, whether you have it or long for it. Employment, you're employed by someone or you're employing others. All that has to be there in the supreme absolute truth. That's what it means, Janmadya Sata. Everything emanates from the supreme absolute truth. Everything means whatever is in your tiny life must be there in perfection in Krishna. That means music, art, dance, loving affairs, but it's all there without the slightest speck of material contamination. And everything we do is drowning in material contamination. Except when we are engaged in Krishna's service purely. And that is our goal as sadhakas, as practicing devotees. Our goal is to serve Krishna with a pure motivation, to chant Hare Krishna with a pure motivation. So we talked about the forest, Vrinda Devi, keeping the forest clean, beautiful, for the sake of Krishna's pleasure. And then there are Krishna's footprints. No one walks on Krishna's footprints in Vrindavan, not even the animals. They all exercise discretion. That's why when Krishna was in the Kalia lake and the residents of Vrindavan saw so many inauspicious symptoms, earth tremors, and all kinds of strange natural disturbances, they immediately thought, something's happened to Krishna. And they all began to look for Krishna. And how did they find Krishna? By looking for his footprints, which were never erased because the animals refused to walk on them. That's how they tracked down Krishna through the footprints and came to the bank of the Yamuna and saw the most devastating sight, Krishna caught in the coils of Kaliya. So Shukadeva Goswami describes that Krishna beautifies the forest with the marks of his footprints. And he's filling the holes of his flute with the nectar of his lips. And the cowherd boys are singing his glories. This is the supreme absolute truth, the ultimate source of everything. He's surrounded by his mates, his cowherd boys, entering the forest. And the girls are all watching. Wouldn't you love to imitate that, man? And we work so hard for a chance to imitate Krishna, although we fail so miserably. And the details given of Krishna's beauty are meant to capture the focus of our mind. A peacock feather ornament on his head, blue kanikara flowers on his ears, wearing a yellow garment as brilliant as gold, and he's wearing the Vaijayanti garland, a garland made of at least how many flowers? Describe nectar devotion, who remembers? 5? Vaijayanti garland also reaches down very low. You remember Chitta Mohini? I just remember that it reaches down. Yes, it reaches down. How low? Very low. We're meant to meditate on these details. So again, Shukadeva Goswami is overwhelmed with emotion as he's describing what the gopis saw and heard. Now, when Krishna plays his flute, as he enters the forest surrounded by the cowherd boys, the flute is not only attracting the young girls, but it's also attracting the older ladies. But their attraction is in Vatsalya Prem, parental love. Just like when Lord Caitanya has as his program, Ramya Kachchid Upasana Vrajavadu Vargenia Kopita. There's no better way of loving Krishna than that demonstrated by the Vrajavadu, the cowherd ladies of Vrindavan. That Vrajavadu includes the young ones as well as the older ones, but there's a difference in the rasa. The younger ones, of course, have the Madhurya relationship, and the older ones have the parental, the Vatsalya relationship. So all this is going on as Krishna is entering the forest. The forest is waiting with all its beauty. It's autumn time. But because Krishna is Madhupati, the Lord of spring, even though it's autumn time in the forest shows the beauty of spring for the pleasure of Madhupati. So he spoke about the context of this verse. In Sri Caitanya Charitamrita, in the first chapter of Adi Lila, you read the description of Vande Sri Krishna Caitanya Nityananda Sahodato Godadaye Pushpavanto Chitta Shando Tamonudo. I offer my respectful obeisances to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Nityananda Prabhu, the sun and the moon rising simultaneously. They dissipate the darkness of all ignorance, and they bestow benedictions upon all. So you remember this stunning analogy, the sun and the moon rising together? Actually, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda are more brilliantly effulgent than millions of suns and moons. But the poetic analogy is given so you have some understanding. There's no material way to understand, but the Shastra is giving you some metaphors so that you get a glimpse. You know the example of Shakachandranaya, the logic of seeing the moon through the branches of the tree. Let's say, little Nitai cannot see the moon in the sky. He's too short. He can't crane his head up and see the moon. So his mother, Gaurarti, tells him, little Nitai, see those tree branches there? Just look through the tree branches and you'll see the moon. Now, what does the moon have to do with two branches on the tree? But you're using that material setup in order to see something that normally you wouldn't see. Even though there's no relation between the two branches of the tree and the moon. So there's no way to talk about Krishna's beauty. But to give you a glimpse, you have examples given in the Shastra like lotus feet or lotus face. I think at New Gupta Vraj, sometimes there are lotus flowers in the pond, yes? Are they real lotus flowers? Yes. And when they're there, you can see they're so delicately beautiful. So there's nothing to compare to Krishna's beauty, but the expression lotus face or lotus feet is used. Now, lotus face, we could say, yes, we understand that. But lotus feet, whose feet are so beautiful that, look at your own feet if you have the lotus flower, Nandishwar. Has Gaur Mantra ever told you? If you just were complimented for having a lotus face, you would feel over the moon, right? For lotus feet, you know that's an exaggeration. So Krishna's beauty is, there's nothing worthy. No words are worthy to describe his beauty. But we feel resentment and dullness and callousness. Why? Because we're concerned about our own material situation. What does being focused on Krishna's situation and his beauty have to do for us? That's always the bottom line. If we're weak in our bhakti practice, after some time, some thoughts come to our mind. What am I doing here? What about me? What am I doing all this service for? Why am I contributing of my precious lifetime, my money, my energies, all for Krishna? What about me? What's Krishna doing for me? What's he giving me? So when we're weak in bhakti due to inattentiveness in hearing and chanting and lack of taking the initiative to render transcendental loving service, when we're weak like that, our material conditioning starts to creep back. Just like if you don't weed a garden, the gardeners at New Gupta Braj know this. If you don't weed the garden, the weeds will grow. And the longer you leave the situation, the more weeds will be there and the more work you have to do. But what usually happens? What usually happens when we neglect our spiritual habits of whatever type? The weeds grow, and then we look at ourselves and say, oh, I've really become hazy and boggy. It'll be too much work to sort myself out. I might as well just go with the flow, and wherever the material energy takes me, I guess that's where I'm meant to be. And then we tell ourselves that, well, actually, no devotees really follow. Or it's only the rare devotees who, year after year, decade after decade, maintain the full bhakti practices. We've spoken before about how the ladies can say that about chanting japa when you have children. No, it's impossible. No one does it. The men also have theirs. You want to know what it is? No householders really follow. Only the rare ones. So when we allow ourselves to be weak, we want to justify it. Actually, the Shastra is very merciful. It says that basically, don't resent the regulative principles. Don't resent the regulations. Keep trying. With regret for your status, keep trying. But if we distort the standard, we're the ones who suffer. When we allow ourselves to become spiritually weak, we start thinking about our material situation in terms of, I am the supreme controller and enjoyer. We start acting in that way, and our memory of transcendental loving service to Krishna becomes lost. The memory is lost, but the pure love for Krishna is never lost. It's there eternally in us, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says in Caitanya Charitamrita. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Saju Kabunoy Shravanade Shuddha Chitani Koraye Udoy. Pure love of Krishna is eternally established in the heart of the living entities. It's not added from outside, and it can be revived by the authorized process of hearing and chanting about Krishna. So this bhakti practice is a revival of what's already in you, but we're unaware of it. And our pure love capacity comes out distorted materially in material existence. You can see that everyone wants to love. Everyone wants to be loved, but we refuse to allow that to happen with Krishna. between Krishna and his associates. Krishna is Brajabhadanaga. He's the love hero of Vrindavan. How are we going to be satisfied just by hearing about him? Of course, Bhagavatam means hearing about Krishna and his devotees. Krishna is always concerned with the happiness of his devotees, and the devotees are always concerned with the happiness of Krishna. The residents of Vrindavan never think about their own well-being. They're simply thinking about Krishna's well-being. Even when they seem to be asking Krishna to protect them, they're actually just concerned for Krishna. He's one of them. If they say we're hungry, it's because they're thinking, Krishna, you ought to be hungry. You've been playing in the forest all morning. This standard of pure bhakti seems so foreign to us at first because we're all so selfish, contaminated by lusty desires. But the more we hear about the standard of real love, the more our natural constitutional position reveals itself. So it's amazing how what we want so much for ourselves we'll deny in Krishna. We want love, but the Supreme Absolute Truth should be impersonal. So the whole world is suffering due to lack of understanding the Supreme Absolute Truth. Even those who claim to be religious, which is something, but they have no understanding in depth of what is the science of the Supreme. So much so that when you hear that he wears a peacock feather ornament upon his head, blue kanikara flowers on his ears, a yellow garment as brilliant as gold, our contaminated mind pushes that aside in favor of some impersonal description. He's formless. He's personalityless. He is the great unknown. Just see how our mind is attracted to that, although there's nothing attractive in that description. But we want the Supreme Absolute Truth to be impersonal so that we can assert ourselves as the personality. Where are my blue flowers behind my ears? When Krishna plays his flute, the Yamuna River, which is normally flowing with current, it's stunned, motionless. And the trees and the vegetation, the plants start shivering. The human beings are usually moving about. They're stunned and motionless. This is life at the ultimate source of everything. So we were talking about the sun and the moon rising together. Nityananda Sahodita. Bande Sri Krishna Caitanya. You never see that, the sun and the moon appearing together, especially the sun and the moon, unlimitedly, brilliantly effulgent. But that is what happens during the appearance of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Nityananda joined Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu later in Navadvip, not from the very beginning. Those of you who have been to Mayapur, you may have gone to Ekachakra. Anyone here been to Ekachakra? Yes. It's a distance away. 4-hour car drive or something like Nityananda grew up with his parents who loved him more than words can describe. And you can imagine their shock when one day a mendicant came to their door to spend the night. And this is hard for us to understand because we have such a different mindset in this age of Kali. But the tradition is that whatever the mendicant wants, the householder gives. So the householders told the mendicant, you like something? Whatever you request, we're blessed to offer you. What did the mendicant say? I'd like to take your son traveling for a few days. Oh. Hadayoja, Nityananda's father, loved his son indescribably and was completely devastated. But still, he did it. He gave Nityananda to the wandering mendicant to be the mendicant's assistant. And Nityananda never came back. Nityananda went with the mendicant and toured South India. And then Nityananda himself went to Vrindavan. In Vrindavan, he knew, I am Balaram. But no one else in Vrindavan could see that. What is he doing in Vrindavan? He's waiting for Lord Caitanya to start Nam Sankirtan, chanting of the holy names in Navadvip. Once Mahaprabhu began his kirtan pastimes in Navadvip, then Nityananda made his way from Vrindavan to Navadvip. So Mahaprabhu was with his associates. And he told them, there's a great personality coming. He didn't tell them who it was. And he also told them about a dream he had, that a chariot came to his door, and on the chariot was an extraordinary personality wearing blue cloth, stunning, towering figure. And that personality announced, I am Balaram. He carried a plow. So Mahaprabhu told his associates the next morning about the dream, and Murari Gupta analyzed the dream for him. Yes, there's an extraordinary personality coming. He's somewhere. We should find him. Because in the dream, one more point, this inconceivably great personality told Mahaprabhu, we'll meet tomorrow. So Murari Gupta said, it sounds like there's some extraordinary personality somewhere in our vicinity. So Mahaprabhu told Haridas Thakur and Srivas Thakur, go search all of Navadvip. See if you can find this personality. So they did that. They went to every house in Navadvip looking for an abnormally extraordinary personality. They even went to the houses of Mayavadis and atheists. That's how thorough their search was. Normally a Vaishnava would never go to such doors. They came back and reported to Mahaprabhu, we couldn't find anyone. We searched everywhere in Navadvip. We didn't search the outskirts, but we searched everywhere and couldn't find anyone who fit the description of like what you experienced in your dream. Mahaprabhu understood Nityananda can only be perceived by his mercy. So he told his associates, I'll take you where he is. Where was Nityananda? He's at the house of Nandan Acharya. If you go to Mayapur, it's right adjacent to the Mayapur temple project. There, Nityananda was waiting. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and walked in with his associates. And there, Nityananda Prabhu and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw each other for the first time in this lila of their coming together. Of course, they're always together. And Nityananda would just stare at Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, drinking him up with his eyes. And then Lord Chaitanya said to Srivas Thakur, recite from the Bhagavatam. And Srivas Thakur recited this verse. The verse we've chanted. Bahapidam natavara vapu karneo karnikaram bibrad vasa kanaka kapisham vaijayanting chamalam randran venor adara sudaya pur prayan gopa vrindaya vrindaranyam sapada ramanam pravishad gita kirti. As we said, this verse in which Shukadeva Goswami is reciting what the gopis saw as Krishna entered the autumn forest. Nityananda immediately collapses on the ground hearing this verse. And Mahaprabhu tells Srivas, recite more Bhagavatam verses. And as Srivas Thakur continues reciting Bhagavatam verses, Nityananda gets up and starts leaping high in the air and crashing to the ground. The devotees they feared for him. He's crashing to the ground from such heights and with such force, he's going to break his bones. But the ecstatic symptoms, the ecstatic response of Nityananda just went on and on, leaping through the air, crashing to the ground, dancing in ecstasy. So the devotees were conversing amongst themselves. Who is this? No one could stop Nityananda's ecstatic outbreak of leaping and dancing and crashing to the floor. Finally, Mahaprabhu himself came and embraced Nityananda tightly, and Nityananda then became still. So the devotees were thinking amongst themselves, you know what this reminds us of? This reminds us of maybe Lord Hari talking to Shiva. Another said, no, Ramchandra talking to Lakshman. Another said, no, Krishna and Balaram. Another said, Krishna and Arjuna. So in this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu met. They're always together. Just as Balaram is the first expansion of Krishna. They're so close, the only real difference is Balaram is whitish and Krishna is dark blue like a rain cloud. Krishna generally wears yellow cloth and Balaram wears blue. It's the only real difference. Similarly, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Nityananda Prabhu are that close. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had asked at this encounter, this first encounter, he asked Nityananda, where do you come from? And Nityananda Prabhu described, I was touring South India, and everywhere I went, I couldn't find Krishna. The altars were empty. I asked the people, where is Krishna? And they told me, he's gone. He's there in Navadvip. So I came to Navadvip. So in this way, Mahaprabhu's Leelas with Sri Nityananda Prabhu began. And this verse that we recited from Srimad Bhagavatam played such a key role in causing Nityananda Prabhu to break out in such inestimable ecstasy. If we can just hear Srimad Bhagavatam for our purification, that'll be a great start. But in Nityananda Prabhu's response to Srivas Thakur's reciting of Bhagavatam, you see the full potential of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. It causes the most unparalleled outbreaks of ecstatic love for Krishna. So at least we can hear Srimad Bhagavatam submissively so that the dirty things in the heart are cleansed. So that there's anartha nivritti, all the unwanted things in the heart disappear. And then there can be taste, ruchi, nishta, fixity in devotional service, attachment, and then on up to bhava, the preliminary stage of love of Krishna, and ultimately to Krishna praying. We want our bhakti to be progressive. We want to develop pure lovers of Krishna. That's the whole bhakti program. Yes, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is infinitely merciful. And part of the mercy is to give us a bhakti program that brings about love of Krishna. So that's why we have various rules and regulations, which are austere sometimes. Srila Prabhupada would say like that sometimes. There is a bit of austerity. The material desires are saying, do this, do this, do this. And you have to deny those material desires. That's austere. Especially you're living in a culture which is all systems go. Why wouldn't you do something that you feel? There's not the slightest reason in the world why you should control yourself. In fact, by trying to control your senses, what are you doing? You're injuring yourself and you're producing psychological imbalances. Which will result in physical damage. But if you would just act according to your impulses, there'll be love, peace, and happiness. I remember as a youth, there was a popular dance show in the USA. And it was called Soul Train. And at the end of every show, it was every Saturday morning, at the end of every show, the announcer, the host, would bid farewell to the audience, to the TV audience. And he would say, I wish you peace, power, and love. So that's our program. We think we're going to get that through our endeavors in material life, right? Wouldn't that be great? Peace, power, whatever that is, and love. I always remember that because it encapsulates the material desire. This is what we want from the material world. This is what we want from the material body. This is what we want from others' material bodies. So one thing we need to become accustomed to is how devotees are at different speeds or different levels. Some want to go back to Godhead in this lifetime and act like that. Others, they're fortunate, but they're on a program by their activities in which it'll take a few births. So you have to get used to that. If you're following Srila Prabhupada's program strictly, you're going back to Godhead in one lifetime. But then you'll say, well, how many can follow strictly all their life? They're certainly praiseworthy persons, but they're probably mystic yogis, and they're not ordinary devotees. But we have to accept the fact. We have the ticket in our hand to finish our affairs in this lifetime. So the instructions are there so that this goal can be attained. Now, not everyone is going to do that. Not everyone is going to have the bhakti lifestyle that takes them back to Godhead in one lifetime. But some will. So as we become mature devotees, we have to become accustomed to not everyone being situated the same way. Yet and still, we have collegial dealings with them, fraternal dealings. So you have to know what you want yourself. Ultimately, it comes down to that. You have to be able to discriminate for the sake of yourself in a humble and respectful way, because you are responsible for yourself. You came into this world alone and you leave alone. So while associating with others of different capacities and speeds and going back to Godhead, you have to know what you want. So bhakti is simultaneously individualistic and communal. If you disregard your individual mandate, your individual responsibility, and say, well, no one I know really follows strictly. All right, take a few births. You're still fortunate you've come to Krishna. Still, it is possible to finish up your business in this lifetime. And acting in such a way to finish up your business in this lifetime doesn't mean you become cold and merciless and rigid. No, you become very soft-hearted, very kind and very caring, because you see all living entities as Krishna's energy. You see Krishna in them, and you see them in Krishna. You're finally starting to be able to really love. But we have this notion that if I become so-called staunch and strict, so-called, I'll be very hard-hearted and I'll just be focused on my own spiritual elevation. That's neophyte life. The more advanced you become, the softer your heart becomes, the more caring and loving you become. So I've explained before that our bhakti community is like a one-room schoolhouse. I don't know if any of you have ever been educated in a classroom where there are several grades at once. Anyone? Gopal? Chantalakshmi. I did that the first 3 grades. There were 3 levels in one classroom, and the teacher was very expert. I remember, yeah, there were like maybe 10 students in first grade. That's the level after kindergarten. I don't know what you call it here. And then another 10 students in the second grade. So the first grade would be on one side of the classroom, the second grade in the middle, and then on the far side would be the third grade, maybe 8 or 10 students. So the teacher was handling 30 students at once of 3 different levels. It's possible. The teacher is very expert. Give it an assignment to one grade of the class, move on to the next class, then come back to the first class, and I saw it's completely possible. The teacher is very dedicated and loved what she was doing. So our Bhakti community is like that. We need those kind of loving teachers who can handle different grades, different levels, while at the same time always pointing out what the standard is. So we talk about keeping Prabhupada in the center. That's always a common phrase on internet sites, and devotees will always talk about that. Let's keep Prabhupada in the center. That means let's keep Prabhupada's program for our lifestyle in the center. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, as Kaviraj Goswami describes, they illuminate not only externally, but they illuminate internally. Kaviraj Goswami points out the sun and the moon, they light up the outside world and you can see what's around you. But the illumination coming from Nityananda and Caitanya light up the interior. You can have the darkness of your interior dispelled. And they let you see what is real dharma, what is real yoga, what is the real lifestyle. They let you see that because ordinarily in the darkness of Kali Yuga, you can't see who you are or how to benefit yourself. Total darkness, although you think you are cognizant of everything and understand everything, you're actually drowning in darkness. If you've ever stayed at some place different from where you normally spend the night, and you wake up in the middle of the night and there are no lights, and you need to go to the bathroom or do something, and it's a strange new place. You've ever had an experience of stumbling around and bumping into things? That's our material sojourn. We can't see. We're bumping into things. And if we can go a few steps without bumping into something, we say, oh, I'm so smart. I went 3 steps without bumping into a wall. And we never find the light switch. It's just, what's the minimum you can bump into on your way to going where you want to go? What's the minimum on the way to the bathroom, whatever? You just never find the light switch. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu allow you to see internally. Just as Krishna promises in Bhagavad Gita. How within the core of your heart, Krishna as a super soul lights up your interior and dispels the darkness of ignorance so you can actually see what is troubling you. You can see the impediments, you can see the barriers. Tesham evanukam partam aham jnana jam tamaha. Nashyami atma bhavasto jnana deepena bhashvata. Out of compassion, I within your heart will turn on the shining lamp of knowledge and dispel the darkness of ignorance. So Krishna comes in this Kali Yuga as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, and they do that to the most undeserving persons. So Chaitanya Charitamrita describes, they let you meet the two Bhagavatas, the devotee Bhagavat and the book Bhagavata. And the combination of the devotee Bhagavat and the book Bhagavata, what do? Give you religious belief? No. They instill in your heart Bhakti rasa, the flavors of loving devotional service. A transformative experience. We're not talking about religious faith as conventionally known, or religious belief or creed. They instill in the heart. In other words, they bring out from the heart what is originally there in the heart's pure state. They let you see what is the real activity of life, and they dispel the darkness, which is anything, even if it masquerades as religion or yoga, if it covers the soul's capacity to unconditionally love Krishna. That anything like that is considered darkness. Even if it's Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, Karma, whatever. What to speak of religions as conventionally known today. If any of those human endeavors obscure or cloud the eternal reality of pure loving service to Krishna, then those elements are considered to be darkness of ignorance. This is how stunning the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is, Sri Nityananda Prabhu. So let us remember this verse recited, the verse we recited by Srivas Thakur upon the order of Lord Chaitanya, when Nityananda was just staring at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then when Nityananda heard this verse, he began leaping, crashing to the floor, dancing in wild ecstasy, and wouldn't stop until Mahaprabhu finally embraced him tightly. That's the only way he stopped his ecstatic outbreak.